All right, welcome everyone to this month's EdTech chat through Open LMS. My name is Michael Vaughn. I'm an adoption and education specialist here with Open LMS, joined by my colleague and direct report supervisor person, Amy Tessitore. But Amy and I love having chats about EdTech in general, instructional technology, instructional design, emerging trends in the world of technology. And this month is no different. So thank you all for joining us. This month, we're actually going to be talking about microlearning. It's relatively popular. I hesitate to call it a trend because trend implies fad. And we don't think it's a fad. We think it's a really important, essential core part of a learning and development strategy. So we're here to talk about some of the myths related to microlearning, but also some of the realities that come along with it and some of the benefits you might enjoy and appreciate. Before we get into that, I wanted to give Amy a chance to talk about something that is near and dear to both of our hearts that is coming up very soon in just several months here.
Yeah. So if you missed it, we've announced our annual conference, the Connected Conference. The Connected Conference is open to anyone in the EdTech, e-learning, learning, education, corporate training world. So kind of covers a wide breadth there. We are going to be having our Connected Conference this year in Charlotte, North Carolina, February 27th through 29th of 2024 at the NASCAR Hall of Fame. So I'm pretty excited. For those who don't know, I always say that we are very lucky that the universe gave me a minivan and not a Dodge Charger because I happen to like fast cars. But we will be down there in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we have a really great format coming up for this conference. Day one will be workshops. We'll have workshops on a variety of different topics, including things related to leadership, but also the really crucial factors when it comes to designing effective education and training programs. And then days 2 and 3 are going to be all types of sessions. We have an incredible number of submissions already. We are still looking for more people to submit session ideas. So if you'd like to do that, make sure that you scan that QR code there. It will take you to the page. You can submit an idea for us for a presentation. We would love to see some more things come in. You'll be able to meet a lot of the Open LMS team there, but also a lot of people from around the world. Last year, we had people from all over the place. As far away as Japan. We had people from Mexico, the US, Canada, and Europe there as well. So this is truly a global experience, and we are hoping that we will get to see you there. Michael and I are both scheduled to be there, and we'll be teaching some workshops and talking about some of the things that we're really passionate about, and we'd love to hear what you're passionate about too.
Yeah, sounds good. And just as a reminder, this overall chat that we're having right now is part of a series we do every single month. And this month's topic is microlearning. So, Amy, do you want to start us off
Yeah.
with a little introduction to microlearning? Just let me know when you want me to move forward with some slides.
Sure. So, Michael mentioned a little while ago, we don't like to call this a fad, even though I think that that's been the perception recently is that microlearning is a fad. But if you actually think about your own life and how you learn different things, you're probably engaging in microlearning all the time. So I have two kids. They were in a big Minecraft stage for a while, and they would go on and on and on about Minecraft, like long lectures. I retained none of that. But if they showed me something small and quick, this is a creeper, these are my villagers, this is pillaging, then I would actually retain that and piece things together. But also just around the house as an adult, when I need to fix something or I need to look something up or figure out how it works, hop over to YouTube and look at a very short video, figure it out and move on. So we are always engaging in microlearning. It's not a trend in our overall lives. It's actually how we function well. But we're starting to see it kind of come in here into the education world in a much more, present and effective way. We're definitely see the numbers growing, but really microlearning is short, compact learning deliverables. So something relatively short. I know when Michael and I make videos for our Open LMS Academy, and things about new features in our products, we have a rule of thumb, and that is we don't want anything that's over 5 minutes in a video. 2 to 5 minutes is our target. We love to follow that up with an opportunity for someone to immediately reinforce that, either pushing them over to a demo course that they have or a quick activity that may even be built right into that video. So, this is something that we use a lot, and it's the compact design that makes this work so well. Because if you were here last month, we talked about cognitive load theory, and microlearning pairs so well with this. So, if you remember, cognitive load theory is an idea, it's a design principle where we design learning in a way that doesn't overload someone's cognitive ability, meaning that they don't become swamped with information to the point of not retaining anything. So microlearning complements that very well because we capitalize on people's peak attention span. And then we also put things out in a way that's easily digestible, easily accessible, and it kind of all comes together to create these highly effective learning modules. So,
All right.
Yeah. So here's some fast facts about microlearning. So we figured we'd start with the facts first, then we can debunk some myths later. So in terms of things that are factual, in 2017, Educause reported that 38% of organizations were already using microlearning, and there were some projections at the time about how much it would grow. By 2018, microlearning actually made up 61% of all e-learning. So even though not a lot of organizations were using it yet, the ones that were using it very heavily. And I think that these two statistics together kind of paint a picture of, in 2017, we didn't have a huge number of people necessarily relying as heavily on e-learning. Obviously, that's changed quite a bit in the last 5 years, but those who were understood that those short lessons were making an impact. Fast forward to 2020, and we are in the throes of the COVID-19 pandemic. Everything goes online, but not everything goes online well. There's a lot online that was not done well. I saw some pretty horrific things happening online, but we also saw people start to recognize that no one wants to create a 3-hour video and post it online. If you don't want to make it, certainly people don't want to watch something like that. And we really started to see microlearning grow. And during 2020, microlearning grew by 40% during that pandemic time as people started to think about what were the most effective ways to deliver learning. Some of this is just because it's an effective learning tool. But I think one of the things Michael and I could probably speak to here is that it became necessity. You had people sharing devices at home because now people's children or family members or other people who lived in their home were all home trying to work, potentially trying to do school or training on shared devices. So this concept of people having a 3-hour block of time to sit down where they once might have been in a lecture hall or a training room, that went away. And so we had to think about, how do we adjust for that? And even prior to the pandemic, we knew that by 2025, the majority of web content would be accessed via mobile device. So initially, the statistic was that 85% of all web content would be accessed via a mobile device. And what the revised statistic is that, and it's not really revised, it's just sort of a parallel statistic, is that by 2025, 72% of people will only access the internet via mobile device. So whereas before we said 85% of the content on the internet would be accessed via mobile device, now we know that of all the people who are going to be accessing the internet by 2025, we are well on track to hit that 72% of people will only be doing that via mobile device. And when I think about my own family, I am probably one of the few people in my family who is regularly using their laptop to access things still. And that is only because I'm kind of glued to it for work. But when I look at, my family who works still in an office, or even my kids, when they come home, they're mobile device only. They're using phone to kind of keep in mind. And, Michael, you'll probably want to speak to this, but one of the things Michael talks a lot about with people is, how do we design for that? How do we make sure that everything we're designing is mobile friendly? Michael, I don't know if you want to just kind of chat for a couple of minutes on, what your thoughts are on that and why that's something that you tend to lead with when we're doing, course design and instructional design courses.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when we talk about micro learning, when things are meant to be tackled in really small doses, like usually no more than about 10 minutes or so, 20 at the longest. When you have so many people who access the internet through mobile devices, when you have so many folks who don't necessarily have a ton of time in their day-to-day work You and I have to do compliance training throughout the year to make sure that we are in compliance with different company policies. And to tell me, hey, Michael, you have to carve out 3 hours of your day to do compliance training is not practical, right? So usually what's happening is those lessons are broken into much smaller pieces so that they can be delivered a little bit more efficiently, but also in a way that doesn't take up as much time. And sometimes that learning does happen on mobile, especially when we think about educational contexts, or if we think about contexts where people are in more rural areas. As an example, they're more likely to access the internet through a mobile device than through a line that's been physically run out to their home. I also think about rural areas where internet is sometimes provided by satellite, which means that it's usually metered and very expensive. So it's almost always more affordable for some folks to have access to the internet on their phone. So I always work that into the workflow, even down to things like, if I use video, where does that video live? So I always encourage folks to use a streaming service for their video just for mobile users. This is sort of an equity issue because people are accessing your video on multiple screen sizes. So if I've got, this is my phone case. My phone's actually my webcam right now. But if I have my phone, it's a really small screen. I don't need a super high quality 4K resolution version of the beautiful training video that someone put together. That's a lot of data to stream to my device. Something like YouTube or Vimeo Pro would do a much better job of streaming the most appropriate size video to my device in a way that I can actually watch it. There are low data modes that will stream a lower quality version of the video so that you can save on your data. There are a lot of things that you can do to make your lesson mobile friendly by default. And that's honestly the way that I would approach it. Is not building for desktop, not building for laptop, but building for making sure that things fit for mobile. It just provides the most flexibility. And the cool thing is it solves a lot of problems that sometimes your users with larger screens and more permanent devices tend to run into.
Absolutely. And I think there's so many important facts there that are key to microlearning. And I think that, it really does go hand in hand with the mobile design piece. And that's an important aspect of that. But also being, like you said, cognizant and aware of the fact that people don't have 3 hours to spend somewhere, but also making sure that the microlearning is something that isn't hogging all their bandwidth and they're able to access it. They're not, using up all their data, just trying to watch one high definition video or something. So all definitely important factors there. If we take a look at the next slide, we can start looking at some of the myths surrounding microlearning here. Mm-hmm. So myth number 1, it is too short to remember anything. Well, that myth is busted. I don't know about you, but I actually only remember short bursts of things. And I think that every year that actually just becomes more and more prominent in my life. So if we go to the next slide there, we'll find that, in fact, retention is actually higher. So retention is 25 to 60% higher for microlearning than for longer learning. And I think Michael and I can both attest to times that we have been in places and you just about 15 minutes in, you're kind of checked out. You're really struggling to kind of pay attention. Everyone knows this about me. If we're in a really long meeting and we haven't broken it up and we've been on the same slide for a while, I have drifted off. I am no longer present in the conversation. And I think that's a common thing. But there's this misconception that if you do small bursts of learning, people just aren't remembering and they're not learning. And the data just doesn't support that. Mm-hmm. With those quick lessons, you've got that immediate opportunity to practice and reinforce. And as we already said, it reduces that cognitive load. And Michael, I know that you are someone who you love to build in those options for people to immediately reinforce when you're doing course design. I'm always amazed. Sometimes I'll pop into a course that Michael's been designing and think, oh, this is amazing. I wouldn't have thought to do this or put it here. But what is your experience here, Ben? I know that we've both heard this, like microlearning is too short to be meaningful. What is your lived experience with that? Are you seeing the same thing, that it's actually more effective than some of the others?
Oh yeah. And we could certainly talk about it from a content creation standpoint, but I know that you and I are also lifelong learners, and we love to learn new things from other people as well. So there's like the student level aspect of what are our own experiences learning in micro learning capacities. So some of the things that I really love in a course is making lessons sort of compact and consolidated into one thing. And there are a couple of tools that I use for that. Sometimes the lesson activity in Moodle that allows me to even create branching scenarios depending on a learner's responses to different questions. But I'm also a big fan of the H5P interactive book, which lets me create a multiple page lesson. I can control what content goes on each page. I can incorporate different H5P activities into there that also incorporate assessment questions along the way, and even assessment based activities. And I do find that keeping those things compact so that they can be navigated through in 5 to 15 minutes tends to be a nice rule of thumb. I even think about my experiences as a learner, learning from others. One example I'll give is actually a chef that I follow on TikTok who posted a video over 2 years ago about how to safely use knives in the kitchen. And if you think about cooking in general, it's a very large topic. There's a ton of stuff that you could learn about cooking and baking, and all that good stuff, and even how to use a knife properly. There's a difference between chopping and mincing and a julienne cut. But this was specifically about knife safety. And in this 3-minute video, he covered just 3 pieces of advice. And 2 years on, I still remember that the advice was it's not a race, right? So no one cares how quickly you chop. So go at the speed that you're comfortable with. A falling knife has no handle, which I thought was a very impactful rule. That's something that I remember quite a bit. And then the third was sharp knives cut produce, dull knives cut people. As a reminder to always sharpen your knives before you use them, because it's actually the dull knives that cut people more because they slip off of what you're cutting. And again, watched that video years ago. I still remember it crystal clear because it was so focused on this comprehensive but consolidated, compact approach to what I needed to know most. And from the content creation standpoint, from the learner standpoint, it's worked very, very well to have things that are, I don't want to use the term hyper optimized, but that's sort of what I'm getting at there.
Yeah, I agree. And it's so funny you mentioned the chef and the knife skills and knife safety in the kitchen, because I have little things that I remember too from videos or interactions I've had over time that just sort of stick there. They are just living in my brain forever. And they're always like little useful things, but such small, tiny snippets. And that it's something that definitely works well for me. And I often come back to something that was always kind of considered a little weird when I was younger, which was that I would remember statistics out of articles. So the whole article could talk about something, it could be pages long, and I would remember this like one statistic that stuck out to me. And it turns out that's really was just a matter of my brain doing its own little bit of micro learning there. It committed to things that were most important and useful in my life and could be important going forward, and kind of ignored some of the other things. And I think like the same thing with knife skills. Michael loves to cook. He's always sharing great recipes with us, especially as we come into the winter months and he's trying different things. So it makes sense to me that that video would stick with you. Not only is it something that is useful, so it's useful in your everyday life, it piques your interest because it's related to something that you enjoy doing, and it was short, so something easy to remember. So that is pretty cool. All right, let's look at our next myth.
All right, so this one. Micro learning is just breaking stuff into short stuff. So this myth is also actually just about all the myths in this presentation are busted. Micro learning does go a bit further than just breaking a long lesson into a short lesson. That's certainly one approach that you can take with micro learning. But the idea with microlearning is that each lesson is its own distinct experience. We're not trying to create something larger. We can certainly link through multiple activities, sort of like how you might have multiple videos that cohesively fit together in a playlist. But the idea is for each micro learning lesson to focus on a single concept. And again, like we were talking about the previous myth, for it to be very focused, to not be overwhelming to the learners. So it's essentially just what they need about that particular topic, uh, in a cohesive way that they can work through in a short period of time. And if I lean back on that example that I gave earlier of the video about knife safety, again, there are a lot of things that you would need to learn to use a kitchen knife safely. There are multiple kinds of knives. There are multiple ways that you can cut food. There are different ways to prepare food versus, you would cut vegetables differently than you would meat if you were trying to butcher up a cut of meat. So it's a very large topic, but the idea of knife safety can be a very compact micro learning lesson that focuses on 3 core principles that will generally lead to you not cutting yourself all that often, if at all, as you are preparing meals. So this is what we're talking about. Certainly you can tie things together if you needed to, but the idea with micro learning is sort of like one and done. It's a cohesive package. It can stand alone on itself without having to lean or rely on any other lesson. So, Amy, what were some of your experiences with this particular approach?
Yeah. So, I have seen where people have taken very long slide decks or really long videos, and their approach was, I will take this hour-long video and I'm just going to break it into 10-minute sections. And that's micro learning. But really, what we're doing with micro learning is we're focusing on a single concept. So we are never focusing on a single concept when we're talking for an hour or so. There's a lot of interrelated pieces going on there. So we sometimes hear about chunking, but chunking is taking a larger concept, deconstructing it like a puzzle, and teaching little individual bits of that, and then reconstructing it. Now, the difference between chunking and microlearning is that in microlearning, we're not deconstructing and reconstructing. We are taking a holistic approach to one single concept or exemplar or something, and we're talking specifically about that. Instead of deconstructing and reconstructing. And I think that's the key distinction here. So, for example, rather than taking a really long slide deck and breaking that into like 50 slides presentations or 10-minute videos that actually all have to be watched in succession to get the whole concept, we've rethought how we're going to present that information and which factors of or which aspects of that longer bit we're going to break down. So if I were teaching someone knife skills, I might have a micro learning that is about just the safety, key concepts of safety. Tuck your fingers, go slow, no need to go very fast. But someone who was teaching all about knife skills might have a section on, where they start and they kind of go start to finish. This is a knife, this is a sharpening it. These are all these things. And they may or may not be things that conceptually we have to learn, but they all run together, but you have to watch every one of them to get to the end. Whereas if we were to take this concept of knife skills and focus very specifically on safety and give a very specific concept surrounding safety, I could watch that and go into a kitchen, use my knife safely. It doesn't matter if I've sharpened it. It doesn't matter if I know about knife types, if it's a Santoku or it's, some other type of knife. It doesn't matter. But I have a single concept that I'm able to learn about, that I've designed a learning package just around that one concept. And I think that's the big difference here. And that's kind of one of the, I think, more difficult aspects of getting the difference between chunking content versus designing a micro learning. I kind of think about micro learning in terms of packages. It's a package, and when I open it, I have a useful gift right then and there, as opposed to you have taken my present and broken it up into 1,000 different packages, and now I have to open them all and put it all together. So that's kind of the difference that I sort of look at it with.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And I even it's not exactly the same, but just so folks have another metaphor to work with, one approach that we take when we develop, let's say, instructional videos that are part of a playlist is, if I'm teaching someone about the assignment tool in Moodle, there are over 60 settings within that tool. So I might have an individual video for each collection of settings, But I also have one comprehensive video at the end that's like, if you needed to just create a basic assignment where someone turns in a document, what does that look like? And that is a compact standalone video. The other ones that dig into the individual settings, they all have to be viewed collectively for you to get a better sense of how they all fit together. But that last one at the end, that's like, if I just need a simple assignment, what settings do I need to pay attention to? Like, where are the 4 or 5 settings? That's essentially what microlearning does. It's just that compact standalone thing. So it looked like we had a little bit of extra information on that one, just about some other things, but I think that might have been tied
It's just an
into.
extra slide.
Yeah.
That's an extra slide I didn't take
Yep.
out.
No
That's
worries.
fine. We can just get rid of that.
Seeing behind the scenes there. No
All
worries.
right.
All right. Next
Yeah.
myth up.
So there is this misconception that microlearning is all video games, gamification, and tomfoolery, that we're just out here playing games all the time. And that is busted. And it's busted in a couple of different ways. Gamification gets such a bad rap. The gamification incentivization piece tends to get a bad rap. People equate this to just playing video games. However, our good friend Jeff Campbell over at MoTrain talks a lot about gamification and incentivization, and he gives some great examples of ways in which turning something into kind of like a game or gamifying things has such a high return on learning and the ability to take skills and apply them in a real world scenario, because that's what we're doing with gamification, right? We're trying to create an opportunity to practice something in a real world scenario where the stakes are not as high as if you were doing this in real world. So it's not just gamification and incentivization, though. We've got video, we've got infographics. The key here is to choose the right tool for the purpose. So form over function, right? So this is things like, if I need to present data, I'm probably not going to do that in a video, but I might do it in an infographic because it's a quick burst of data where I can show some the correlation between statistics, the interrelationship between different data points, and I can also add emphasis based off the type of graphics I'm using. So, for example, if I'm trying to show that one segment of the population is more affected by the statistic we're reporting on, I can make that segment have a larger person. There are lots of ways that I can use infographics to convey data. But if I'm actually trying to have someone apply a skill, for example, or I really would like to incentivize them because we know that incentives work for people, I might use a gamification and incentivization piece here. I always say all the time, grown-ups like gold stars too, and that is 100% true. We talk a little bit here about what does it look like to have reward and recognition, and it doesn't have to be something really extravagant. It can be someone sent you a gift card to go get an ice cream or a coffee. These things, these small things are super meaningful. And that's where the gamification and incentivization comes in. So the reason I say that this myth is busted is for 2 reasons. One, because gamification and incentivization get such a bad rap, and they shouldn't. They're highly effective. But also because microlearning isn't just playing games. There's so much more to it. And I know, one of the things I had an opportunity to sit in on a conference session that Michael did over the summer. And one of the things, it kind of plays into microlearning, but he was kind of explaining to people the things you should and shouldn't do. And he had a squirt bottle that was spraying at like the thing you shouldn't do. And it would say no, and that would pop up. And that will forever stick in my brain. And I remember every one of those things we shouldn't do. But it's a good example of how using the appropriate graphic for something to convey a message, that's really a big piece of microlearning. There it is. The no with the spray bottle. Exactly. This will forever stick in my brain as something that I thought was really effective. And the feedback from attendees of the conference was, they will remember those things, the things that you shouldn't do, because there was a graphic associated with that short burst of information that he gave us in the conference session. But the graphic was the right tool for the purpose, which was to convey to people what we do and don't want to do, and when we need to stop and don't stop. And so, again, not just gamification and incentivization, but there are so many cool things and important things that you can bring into microlearning.
Yeah. I'll just say as a final defense of gamification, I think it's important to note that board games, as an example, predate written language. We invented games before we invented writing down the things that we were saying. So this is a very important social element of things that we do. And games have all sorts of elements that are much more forgiving than traditional learning environments. I remember having some teachers in college who were very inflexible if I struggled with an assessment and I didn't perform well. And I could go back to my dorm room and play a video game, and it's like, oh, I died. Just going to restart from the last spot where I saved, right? I got as many opportunities as possible to start over until I got it right. And that's one of the really key parts of learning, because at the end of the day, it's not that we want to punish learners. It's that we want learners to do their namesake, which is learn something, right? And that's really where a lot of those gamification strategies come in handy. All right, let's with respect to time, move on to our next myth in there, which is micro learning is for youngsters.
Get off my
those,
lawn.
those darn millennials, those Gen Z kids, maybe even the Gen Alphas, but also a very well busted myth. The micro learning is suitable for all ages. It's suitable for all attention spans. If you are more of a book reader than a phone reader, it will still work very well for you. And it provides something that many learning environments sometimes struggle to provide, which is a level of flexibility and convenience that meets the learner where they are at. If I think about large companies that have multiple departments and people in a lot of different areas, you might have a core part of your business where those employees are on the go out in the field. You might have a core set of employees who are in office buildings or working remotely in a more office style capacity. They still need to complete the same sorts of compliance training, as an example. So, what are you going to create so A, you only have to make it once, but B, that works for all of your employees, the folks who are out in the field who might have 10 to 15 minutes between a job or a call to do some professional development or compliance training, as opposed to the folks in the office, right? Those quick bursts learning experiences are incredibly valuable because of the flexibility that they provide. And even if you are not in a corporate setting, if you're in more of an educational setting, your students are very likely using mobile devices. I think we're above 99% here at this point in terms of adoption of smartphones for students who are entering college. So they are using mobile devices, and they're very often using mobile devices to access class-based material. So creating content that they can easily engage with on the go when they have time, when they have a spot in their schedule that they need to fill with something, is incredibly advantageous, because you've basically lowered the barrier of entry for them. So it's not just for young folks, it's for folks all over. It's for folks who love to read books and folks who love to read Reddit. Like, it's a wide variety of folks out there. So it's an incredibly flexible approach to teaching and learning. And I would say that, like, I probably don't have to convince a lot of folks on this call that micro learning has a lot of benefits, and I don't think Amy would have to work too hard at that either. So if you are already on board with micro learning, what I would encourage you to do is just think about some of these things, so you have them in your back pocket if you start to work with a stakeholder in your organization, or maybe a faculty member at your college or university or school that is a little bit more hesitant and reticent about using something like this. So, Amy, any other thoughts on this one?
No, I think, when we think about what we're trying to accomplish with education and training, we're always trying to overcome certain barriers, whether those barriers are socioeconomic, barriers related to ageism, ableism, and things like this. And this is where I think that when we have myths like microlearning is for young people, or microlearning is only for people who have short attention spans. These types of myths make it very difficult for us to present and ensure equitable access to education and training. And as Michael said, you might need to put the same training out for a variety of people who work for your company or in your industry, or for students in different with different unique access needs in your courses. And when we look at microlearning and the benefits of it and the fact that it's easily accessible, most people have a smart device now. Many cell phone carriers now have moved to very inexpensive, unlimited data. We have in the US some universal access plans that help to lower that cost for people in certain income brackets. Wi-Fi is becoming more readily available, free Wi-Fi more readily available. We realize that using things like microlearning really does help us achieve this idea of equity and equitable access in education, because one of the things Michael and I often talk about is our company has a mobile application that connects to any of our LMS platforms. There is an option there to download your content so you can work offline. So if I have students who live in a rural area and don't have access to high-speed internet at home, they can actually still take their device home and work on some of that content. Obviously, video is excluded there, but microlearning really helps with this. So if we have people who are at home taking remote classes, we don't know the home situation and why that's a preference for them, but they may have to fit their learning in between a variety of different things. Microlearning works. If we have people who only have a mobile device to access things, microlearning works. If we have people who are in the same company but in different job functions, and maybe they're in an office and maybe they're not, and maybe they have a kiosk and maybe they don't where they can go, microlearning works for them. So in terms of helping to upskill and promote learning across a wide variety of use cases, microlearning is really key there. And I think that that is one of the most important things to remember, is that there are a lot of myths out there. And Nicole asked, it makes me wonder, how and where did these myths start? Just a thought. So Nicole, it's very much like AI and machine learning and LMSs. I think sometimes these myths start where people become or start to feel threatened by the advent of technology. And they're afraid that technology is going to take their jobs. And in education, there's this old phrase, and it's sage on the stage or guide on the side. And the sage on the stage is the person who believes that they hold the knowledge and they are there to tell people the knowledge that they hold. And it can only come from them, and it comes in the form of lecture or things that they create. And then there are people with the mindset of guide on the side. And their thought is, my purpose is not to keep knowledge. My purpose is to help people get access to knowledge, because knowledge is currency in our world today. The more informed you are, the more currency you have in terms of being able to navigate the world, make decisions, be more financially solvent or successful, things like this. So I think that that old sage on the stage mentality sometimes plays into where these myths come from, which is that if we start creating short bursts of learning that I'm not actually delivering, then there's no reason for me to have a job anymore, right? My job is going to get pushed out. The meaning of my entire career is kind of gone now, but that's not true. It's like anything else. We have to learn how to adjust the technology and leverage it and use it well. And Michael talks a lot about this when he talks about AI, where again, we're starting to see that resurgence of people feeling like AI is going to steal their jobs. We've done enough work with AI to know it's not stealing any of our jobs anytime soon, but it is a very helpful tool for us to use in our jobs. So like anything else, you can become fearful and kind of, perpetuate misinformation or disinformation or negative ideas about something, or you could learn to embrace the tool and figure out, how does that actually make me more effective at what I do? And how does it make me more meaningful in what I do? And Nicole, I really think that that's where those myths kind of start. And a big part of that is helping people to not feel so threatened by technology.
Yeah, I would support that as well. I think about it in terms of what happened with some instructors when COVID lockdown started happening, where their traditional teaching style was to come into the room, lecture for a good long while. Maybe they had some PowerPoint slides, maybe they didn't, and then that was the primary instructional approach. And when you translate that into an online environment, usually what it ends up being is a very long recorded video. We've seen 1 to 3 hour videos on some sites from instructors who just record themselves talking the entire time, rather than trying to compartmentalize some of that content and create more cohesive experiences. So that transition, that translation of one sort of format and environment to another is hard enough if you are evolving your face-to-face approach, let alone trying to translate it to a virtual environment and then take on a new approach. And I think just to piggyback on something that Amy said a little bit earlier, we obviously love micro learning. We think it's a great approach for education. It's not a universal approach, is really what it is. It's just another tool in the toolbox to pull out when it is most appropriate to be applied and to be used. It's very versatile. It's very flexible. It can do a lot. There are a ton more myths that we didn't even get to cover today, just because we wanted to make sure that we were watching our time. But you can use micro learning for complex topics. You can use it for hands-on experience and tasks. It is very versatile, but it's not necessarily a universal approach to education. It's just another approach that we think has a lot of merit, has a lot of value, and is worth your time and consideration. So along those lines, Amy, you mentioned AI, and all I could think about is like that image that I shared the other day where like there's an AI image generator called Midjourney, and someone on Reddit had come up with a prompt that they used in April 2022, and then they used the same prompt to make an image again in April of this year, and then I used that same prompt last week, and just the difference is stark. It is improving very rapidly. It's a very cool technology. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say on that same idea, the image. So the very first image that's shown in that, the man has like a double ear. And I was generating an AI image last night for something, and it had the option to remove extra body parts. I thought, oh, so that's the advent here. This is where we're going with the technology. It was so funny that it all happened kind of in the same week to see that difference. But the degree to which the enhancements and imagery especially is pretty significant. Whereas at the same time, we're starting to hear reports of a backslide in things like ChatGPT's ability to generate cohesive types of responses to things. They're a little bit disjointed. They don't read well. So it's funny, but again, ChatGPT is sort of it is fed by the information people put into it, right? So you can see where AI image generation, because it's a kind of a confined database, might make more sense. Whereas if anybody can put information into ChatGPT, eventually you're not going to get great info out. Kind of like, when you get on a Wikipedia page and you think to yourself, some of this seems okay, but some of this seems not accurate. But I think that it is an interesting thing to see kind of how AI is changing.
Yeah, absolutely. That might be a good topic to revisit. We did this one. We talked about it in an EdTech chat back in, I think, late winter, early spring of this year, but it might be something to revisit given the strong and renewed interest. But along those lines, if you all happen to have a topic in mind that you think would be really great for this session, or if you want to join us as a guest, please feel welcome to reach out to either of us via email. We've got our emails up on the screen here, and let us know what that actually is. So we would be happy to consider all ideas, all guest proposals, and move from there. I see, let me just make sure I do one last scroll of the chat.
I think we're getting some really great feedback in here about where some of these myths have come from. The lack of open-mindedness, course formats, which is an interesting one. I think we all have certain favorite things. I'm a big proponent of something called the tiles course format. You will hear me talk about it if you're ever with me. And the reason I like it is because it so closely replicates what the current user experience is for so much on the web. So if I log in right now to my Hulu account, Every person in my family and attached to my account who has a sub account has their own tile with an image that they chose and their name. For what it's worth, mine is Moana and it says best mom because the kids made it, and I will forever hang on to that one because they're teenagers. I won't always be the best mom, but that is a common experience for people. So yes, course formats really do matter here. We still see sometimes people using older course formats, having either not been introduced to newer formats or concerned about how they make that transition. And there are a lot of newer ones out there. When you are using open source software, and there are some different ones, but the software that we use, even things like a topics format got a new look and feel to it recently that makes it really, really effective in terms of mobile learning, because we can collapse topics and just open the current topic, and that's really helpful. So I do agree. I think sometimes we adopt the technology and then it kind of gets stuck. It's like a time capsule. So we have to kind of bring it forward, but you need that open-mindedness, or the fearlessness. Absolutely. You need someone who's willing to kind of move forward. And then we have that, having the will to accommodate change and thinking of tech as a takeover and not a possible aiding tool. I think that is one of the biggest things that we face in this industry, is the concern that technology is taking something away from us when actually it's giving us more tools in our toolbox. Yeah, lack of interest in how we learn. I think this is problematic and always has been. I think not necessarily new, because if I think back to when I went to elementary school, I started in one type of school where things were everyone sat in a desk and you just sat there the whole day. We did not interact with anything. We didn't move around. And then I moved over to a different school, but by that point I was in a higher grade. It was very similar. When I was teaching in K-12, it was a complete change. We were doing learning centers for kids. They were self-directed. They had a sheet, so they had to go to each learning center a certain number of times per week. And in there were hands-on activities, audio activities, visual activities, a variety of different ways for learners to engage with content. And it was really effective. And that was a district that was really interested in how kids learn. So strong pedagogy there, a real focus in how people learn, and giving the opportunity for people to have choice in learning. So I won't say the word we don't like to hear, but sometimes having a preference in how you engage with that content matters. There are days when I am happy to be on a video, and other days I'd rather just actually read the content. And so having that opportunity and the different modes is super important.
Yeah, even the context of the learning environment, like I tend to lean towards video, but if I'm revisiting that content and I just want a specific spot, I am much more likely to engage with a transcript because I can search through it in my browser and jump right to the spot that was like, oh yeah, that was what I wanted to remember. All right, sounds good. Well, I think we've hit our stopping point and even gone beyond a couple of minutes. So thanks for hanging out with us an extra 3 minutes for our 45-minute EdTech chat. Again, we will be back next month. You can follow Open LMS on LinkedIn to keep track of when those are going to be. We're still accepting proposals to present at Connected 2024, our conference. It's coming up in just 159 days, which sounds like a lot, but it's right around the corner. So please consider joining us for that EdTech conference. It's going to be an excellent experience. It was great last year. It's going to be great this year too. And thank you all so much for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.